Today we have Tracey Thomas, lead at WECAN. Tracey, you're the creative director, producer, and host at Good Mess Media, based in New York City in Tribeca. You create premium podcasts, digital series, documentaries, YouTube content, and live experiences designed to connect, move, and resonate. And you produce the Circle This podcast, my friends and Dre. And so that's how we met. I'm grateful you're here. Thank you for sharing your story, insights, and vision. Talk to us about Good Mess Media and your vision with us.
Well, first of all, thank you, Stephanie. That's quite the intro. But also, before we start, I have to say thank you so much for bringing We Can and She Can to the world. It's so necessary right now, and storytelling is my first love. But having a connecting place that brings people together and doing what you're doing in such an organic, authentic way, it's really fantastic. And I know you probably hear this all the time, but I just had to say it before we kick off.
You're so
Uh,
kind, Trace. Thank you.
yeah. No, I honestly I think you're amazing. So it's an honor to be here. Good Mess Media was something that had been germinating in the back of my mind for some time. And I love podcasting. I love the experience that from a host, from a producer, from a team, we can literally move straight into the earbuds and
Mm,
have a direct relationship with individuals. And it's that kind of connection, meaning that people can find their community. And I think in a world that's experiencing a loneliness epidemic, podcasts have gone through the roof because you are able to A, choose the podcast you listen to, and B, it's a very intimate thing. You're choosing either maybe it's a story or a medical journal or like a circle this, like a spirituality where you're connecting back to the universe and yourself. And that's what I love about podcasting. And I fell in love with digital media 10, 15 years ago. And the Good Mess Media part of it came about because I used to say this thing all the time around my mum, which was, Mum, life is just such a mess. And my mum would say, yeah, but it's a good mess, honey. And I used to say it all the time. Life's such a mess, but it's such a good mess. And so the idea of creating a storytelling company that's called Good Mess Media just fell into place.
yeah. Tracy, and I love it because you really are about thoughtful storytelling and bringing those things to life where we get connected, where we immerse each other into stories and we get real meaning from them, which is a very different concept to many other companies who are in it for very different reasons. So, talk to us about these values that are sort of, the most important, sort of thread through all of your work.
Yeah, it's a really great question actually, because I feel like in our industry, in the podcasting world, everything is about the numbers. How many
Yeah.
people are listening to the show? How many people are watching on YouTube? How many followers do you have on social media? And it's not inspiring. It just doesn't get my motor running. What interests me is what brings us together, what connects us, what's something that's um, new and interesting or innovating. And I think about all the documentaries or Oscar award-winning films that have really resonated with people. And it's because they stick to a creative that they want to tell the story of.
Mm,
And I think in the podcasting world, when you get stuck in the we need to make this kind of content because we'll be able to draw this audience and these kinds of numbers, loses the creative X factor that actually draws the crowd that
mm,
wants to keep watching. And so I was thinking about when I was starting Good Mess Media was how do we do what we do best and support the talent so that they can do what they do best. And I know you've interviewed hundreds, thousands of people. And the one thing that I kept coming up against was that creative people love to do what they do.
yeah.
And the emailing, the setting up of the graphics and the intellectual property and the lawyers and the RSS feeds, they get overwhelmed by that. And so if they get bogged down in those running operational
Mm.
podcast things, they don't get to be as fantastic and to do what they do brilliantly as a host or as talent. So I wanted to create a company that could support and come around and bolster the talent to be at their best, and we handle all of the operations so that they can just walk in, sit down, and be fabulous and draw that natural, organic, authentic crowd. And one of the things I noticed too in the industry, and look, I've been in it a long time, so it might have shifted recently, but a lot of the big conglomerates really do own you. They
Yeah.
own what comes through, the money, the structure, the way that you
Mm.
present the show. And I really did find that if I just change that business model up a little bit, where the talent is your partner in crime and you become their engine, if you will, be like the creative engine that helps them bring to light the stories they want to tell.
Yeah.
I have found that the shows I've worked on, the ones that I've really produced behind the scenes in that kind of style, have always managed to rise the cream of the crop, because they're telling stories that's from them, and it's not just about numbers. It's about, how can I tell this story that's in me to tell in a better way, and be supported with what I call the recipe of, the you have to have the continuity between the social media and the YouTube page and the website and the Substack, and if you're getting on stage and you're presenting, all of it needs to have a through line and
Yeah.
a brand guide. And that's just something that talent are just not interested in, because, or they might be interested, but it's just so overwhelming for them. So it's my job to really come around the people we work with and my team to help them be supported to do the thing that's in them to do as a creative.
Yeah. Tracey, I
Long-winded way of
wish I
answering.
wish I had this set up, because I always think when you're a non-for-profit, which is what WECAN is, we sort of try and do everything, which is really overwhelming. I wish I had that, motor. I mean, I do have some help, but it's not sort of a good mass media sitting in the background helping with so many things. I'm wondering, you really know these recipes that cut through the noise, talk to us a little bit about advice for people who are maybe just starting, what that recipe could be, because the podcasting world, or you know all of that sort of media world, is amazing, and I always think there is so much opportunity still, but there is a lot of noise, and it's really loud, and it's really hard to cut through it.
So you're curious about what it is that cuts through?
Yeah.
Okay. That's really interesting, because there's no rhyme or reason these days.
No.
And sometimes something will catch that nobody expected to catch.
Totally.
And in other ways,
You're totally right. I mean, to me, and I'm really not an expert, I'm just doing it, and I keep doing it because it's a non-for-profit and we're here for a reason, and we have enough listeners to make it worth it. But what really resonates, I sometimes think, is definitely honesty. Honesty to
mm,
me seems to be the one thing. We can't change things if we're not honest, right? So honesty is sort of the bottom line. The people who really turn up brutally honest, and sometimes that's devastating, right? Because it's about grief, or it's about, difficult topics, but this honesty seems to cut through the noise. um, Vulnerability definitely sort of cuts through the noise. So people really showing up authentically. But I mean, we started a YouTube channel that is sort of, has, is gaining listeners. So it's sort of getting interesting. Podcast, we then sort of launched on the side, and we had such few listeners at the beginning. I mean, I was so disheartened. I thought, how can we have so many on YouTube, but then we have like 50 people a month on podcast?
yes.
How does one grow there? And then all of a sudden it jumped. It jumped like quite massively, and I have no idea why that is. There is no rhyme and reason. We didn't change anything. We literally haven't done anything differently.
Mm, mm,
And because we're very home baked, we're always trying to look at the data and lead that. But I mean, we don't know. We have no clue, really. And so I'm wondering what are the things that you could attribute for people that produce content that cuts through the noise?
yeah, that's okay. That's fantastic. It's a good way to phrase it, actually, because you're right. There is no rhyme or reason as to why a show takes off or doesn't. Often it comes down to the simple things like the authenticity of the host, which
Mm,
is why I think yours is taking off because we're at a point now where we consume so much digital media that we have a radar for the BS.
yeah,
And I think people are really thirsting for, sorry to keep using the word, but authentic content that just
yeah.
it's more than just I'm being didactic and I'm teaching you and you will absorb this
Mm,
information that is wisdom dropping. But when it comes to what makes a great podcast, and if you're starting out, the things I always say to you is the first 20 episodes are the hardest.
mm,
And they're the hardest because podcasting is really difficult. And there's so much more to it than people realize,
yeah,
especially when you're new.
yeah.
And if you can have the tenacity and the persistence to show up every week and get through the cringe-worthy when you listen back to your own voice for the first time and you realize that you're repeating words and that, oh, was that what I sound like? And
I
maybe
know.
that wasn't a great episode. All the things that happen to every host I've ever worked with, and even myself when I used to host, that podcasting can be a lot of fun. And we just have to take a breath, step back,
Mm,
and just remember you don't have to be great to start, but you do have to start to be great.
yeah.
And that's probably the thing I'll always come back to when giving advice to podcasters is stop thinking about it and just go for it. You have to
Mm,
jump in boots and all. Now, caveat, you do your research. Find out what RSS feed might work for you. Work out if you have one camera, great. You don't have to have the expensive gear and a four cam setup and be perfect. But I do think that a lot of people, I have watched people get paralyzed by the overwhelming operations of a podcast,
mm,
but they've got this brilliant idea that they're really passionate about. And often you've probably seen it or heard it spoken to friends. Oh, I thought about starting a podcast, but I didn't have time or I didn't know where to start, so I left it. And I think that's the main point I would really hammer home, which is just have a go. And even if it sucks, even if it is the worst thing that you've ever heard in your life and you're embarrassed, still put it out because you will be surprised at how many people will connect with it.
mm,
Just the relatability. If you're a mum, tell that story. If you're um, new in the business world or you've made a career change, tell that story because you're
yeah,
never going to be alone and people will find you. The community will find you.
yeah, yeah, I agree. And Trace, how do you feel, what learnings could you pass on from, sort of cutting through the noise to actually, turning over, like making some money with this
Yeah,
podcast or digital content? Because
it's the
that's
million
another
dollar
whole
question.
hurdle, right? I sometimes
Yes.
think, gosh, we seem to have like all of a sudden like listeners I would have never thought we would reach. And then I think, wow, we're making tiny amounts of money for that.
Yeah, it's an excellent question and one that if you want to take a podcast from being a hobby into a full-fledged business, it's important to go down this rabbit hole. So there's a few different ways to make money on podcasting. Ultimately, this is where that conversation we were saying about the numbers
Yeah,
can be something that you do have to look at.
yeah,
Now, it's not where I put my energy. Like I said, I truly believe that the creative engine and growth is through social media and YouTube. That is the way new people find you.
Mm,
But how to make money and how to reach out to brands, it really is about the audience that's listening.
mm,
So the way that Good Mess approaches it is we are saying to any brand, okay, we've done my research on this brand. We know where they spend their money on marketing.
mm,
We know if they've done podcasting before,
mm,
and we also know what who their audience, their target audience is. If you do the research and spend time on brands that potentially could really benefit being featured on your show, then it's a matter of alignment. So rather than pitching them numbers, I always pitch them the production team behind it, the growth opportunity, and knowing their brand inside out and how we can help them and be of service to them. Because that's really, when you're a CEO, you're asking two questions: what's it going to cost me? And what's my return on investment?
yeah.
So if I can answer the question in their vocabulary, in the way their brand guide is set up, then it's an easier conversation rather than, okay, let's just talk numbers,
Yeah.
because it's more than that. You're storytelling. And then because I have my own, I'm lucky enough to have a company and an amazing team behind me. We're able to uh, pitch certain things, like not only can we put pre, mid, and post rolls into our audio, but we can add baked in host read ads into our YouTube channels. We can also do collaborations on social media with you. But I also have a creative studio where we can shoot ads for you in our studio. So it's
Mm,
a little bit of an extra bonus, but I wasn't always there. I used to be on my own, just a solo producer out in the world. So I will say I realize I'm in a place of privilege when I say that I'm a studio that I can pitch to brands, and it's a little bit more appealing. But if you're new to this and just how to reach out to brands, just don't be afraid for the no. Send 50 emails, and if you get one back, that's exciting stuff. That's all I would
exactly.
say, is just keep going and be okay, be comfortable with the no.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we need to become very, or I know I'm so resilient now. I mean, I absolutely don't take it personally. I reach out to
Mm.
hundreds of people every month, and then percentage says yes to come on, and they give me half an hour of their time, and they lead by example, and they understand what it's all about. And for some people, it's actually giving them a platform. And everyone who comes on, we celebrate and we honor and we give shout outs to, and are excited to have all these incredible people who do all these incredible things and lead with such important um, leadership principles, really. And, some people that we wouldn't necessarily see as leaders, they're leaders in our book because they show how to be good humans and they show how to do something for the greater good, etc., etc. Tracy,
Stephanie, that I just, sorry to interrupt. I just have to say, I think what you just said there's really, really important to reiterate. You show up authentically, and brands will, they want to align with people that get that. They really do, honestly, because brands know the power of influence and engagement. They understand that better than anyone. So what you just said is perfect, because you've got people that are engaged and constantly showing up for you. You're the common denominator. So they
mm,
come back because they like your style, they like your heartfelt conversations, they like the the vision and the idea of what WECAN is and SheCan is. And so brands will come to you. And so going back to my point, where stay authentic to who you are as a creator, because if you do that, not only will you'll get really interesting guests that want to be on the show, you'll also find that brands like what you're showing up in the world as, and their audiences will recognize that. And that's when you start to bring in good dollars for podcasting.
yeah, and
Authentic,
we're
authentic,
really
authentic.
right at the beginning of that. And I think that has to do with, I am not someone who is so happy in the limelight. And it took me actually the
Mm.
last years to sort of sit here and think that I can be the one who draws out all of the stuff of people and portray them in the best possible light. Because because I love people, not because I want to sit here and be the one that is sort of, the whole thing is about me. I really couldn't give a hoot. I'm just a sort of megaphone, for a value or a value system that I feel is important that I'm not seeing mirrored in the world anymore as much. And I want to give that. I have 3 children and lots of godchildren and ran orphanages and schools. And so have lots of relationships to the young people that I care deeply about. So for me, it was all about doing something for them. And I guess then this bigger thing that's behind you becomes the motor that gets you to step out of your thing and become sort of bold in very middle age, mid 50s, become sort of bold and just go for it. I'm wondering, Trace, you see many different, sort of productions. What do you feel people want to see? I mean, what do people want from creators?
Mm. Again, Stephanie, with these excellent questions. This is why you're so good at what you do. I think just through my experience, and I can only speak for
Yeah,
myself,
yeah, yeah,
is I think that we live in a very polarized world right now,
yeah,
and it doesn't matter where you are in the world, it's polarizing.
yeah.
And I think we're getting to the point where AI is everywhere and it's
Mm,
saturating every part of digital media that we see. And I have found that what people are going back to is the creative content maker who is telling stories from home
mm,
about, I mean, for example, a really good example of this is a really good friend of mine and a person that I produced a podcast for created something called The Unlikely Country Woman.
mhm,
And it's about this incredible woman who, a good friend of mine, who was a city girl. She was Miss New York and has a master's degree in business and speaks French and is very, she's stunning and well spoken and has traveled the world, and she's a creative content maker. So she has all these characters and is a comedian, is very funny, and is a writer and author and all those things. But she's moved out to upstate and bought this gorgeous house that was built in the 1700s. And she started this Unlikely Country Woman because people are thirsty for funny,
yeah,
endearing, back to basics,
mm,
grassroots content that
yeah,
they don't have to think. They can just watch, laugh, enjoy, and be inspired.
yeah,
And it's kind of like mum's cooking. I sort of
mm,
I call content like that soul food
yes,
and like mum's cooking. And that's what I really do think that the audience is seeking these days, is
yeah,
something that's coming back to our earlier point. People are done with the BS of it. They
mm,
don't want it to be perfect and polished. They want it to be stripped back and conversational. And well, that's just from my little part of the
yeah,
world, my
yeah,
lens of what I'm seeing.
yeah. I love it. Tracy, so how did you get to where you are today? Give us some pivotal points so we can understand and see how someone's journey unfolds.
Wow, that is a loaded question, Stephanie. There's so much.
You never know
uh,
what you're stepping into.
you don't. You honestly don't. I was thinking about this just before preparing to come on the show. What were the big major things in my life that really changed me on a cellular level? And not to take us down a dark path, but I will say when I was 14, I lost my father,
Mm,
and that was one of the. It was a game changer. It
mm,
really it taught me the value of living. And
mm.
I know that sounds really cliche, but
No, it's
at
beautiful.
14, yeah, it was a blessing to learn to show up with love for the people that you care about and
Mm,
really cheerlead them. I one of the things that when my time comes, I hope that the obituary is just full of people saying, Trace showed up for me. She's such a good friend.
yeah.
And that's honestly because of the experience I went through as a 14-year-old and losing my father young. I just really I realized that it's hard to articulate when you're 14 how you feel about anything.
Mm.
And so I found myself smiling and saying, I'm fine and I'm great and thank you very much. Because also, people don't want that. How are you really feeling? Like,
No,
they
no,
don't want you to at
absolutely.
14,
Mm.
right? So
Yeah.
I did develop a little bit of an armor
Mm.
as to if I'm smiling and asking people questions, they're not going to ask me questions. Funny, I ended up
Yes.
in media. But I will say that it also taught me to love the people that are around you,
Mm.
really love them. Like, why wait till they're passing away until you're standing up at their funeral to say,
Yeah.
I just love this about them. They made me laugh. They made me feel good about who I was as a person. They showed up to that event when I didn't think they could or would. Just it's the little things in life. So that was probably one of the cellular changes growing up. And another one that strikes me just as we're talking is I had incredible parents that loved me for me.
Mm.
And I was a little bit of a strange, you know, completely endearing, wonderful kid, but I was a little strange and I loved sport and I was obsessed with sport. But I was also, I would tell stories and because I was dyslexic and I would go to read books and would just make up the stories because the words wouldn't come to me in the right way. But it's funny, I ended up in storytelling, isn't it? Like I used the thing that was my Achilles heel to then
Make it a
to
superpower.
be my superpower. Yeah.
Mm.
Which was something that was a hard lesson for me because I didn't know I had dyslexia until I was an adult.
Mm.
But it was something that it once I figured it out, I was like, oh, that makes total sense now. And it's actually why sometimes when I sit down and I'm producing or I'm going through a documentary script or something, it does help me when I can seriously focus on, all right, what's the end result here and how do we go about it? But that all comes back to having phenomenal parents that encourage me to dream big, to color outside the lines. And
Mm.
I grew up in a very evangelical home, which was amazing, but I'm not, I wouldn't say I'm a religious person. And it would be remiss of me, and I don't always talk about this publicly, but I also came out in my early 20s. And that was a really interesting best and worst time in my life
Mm.
because I still have a great relationship with my family and I love them and they love me. We're very different people, but it was a time of self-discovery in terms of what do I stand for and how do I want to show up in the world. And I loved the concept of like loving people, love thy neighbor
Mm.
as thyself,
Mm.
and living life where you're compassionate and showing up with kindness in a workforce, but still being assertive and going for being a hustler in the workplace, but still having that kindness. And so I love my upbringing. I never want to say anything negatively about the church or religion or anything like that. It's just we're very different people, but it affected me in a huge way. And I in for about 2 years spent a lot of time on my own and stepped away from a lot of my friendships and those kinds of big events, losing a father, coming out when you're young and rewiring how you view the world,
Mm.
and then also recognizing that um, sometimes your difference can make you special too in the way that you want to live your life as an adult. So those three things are the main when I think about what has really impacted my life, those three things,
Yeah.
definitely.
Thank you, Trace, for generously sharing. So, what does success look like for you? What does it mean?
Great question. Mm. Success is contentment in every day, but also simultaneously wanting and being willing to strive for more.
Mhm. Lovely.
They're diametrically opposed concepts, but I do think that there is power in being happy with where you are, being content with where you are, and looking back and going, wow, I did that. I really did that. Because we don't always do that. We don't always smell the flowers as
No,
we go.
rarely.
So finding, yeah, like it's something that I don't always get it right, but it's one thing that I really try to do is be content in every day that I have.
Mm.
And then on the flip side of that, to still strive, to still, get off the couch and what can I do for the business? How can I tell better stories? Who else can I elevate? Whose story needs to be heard? I still feel like straddling those two things. I don't know if I've got it down just yet, but that's one thing I'm really striving for, is to hold those two things simultaneously.
Amazing.
Did that answer your question? I don't even know
Yes,
if that answered your question.
absolutely. 100%. What challenges do you feel you sort of keep facing and have to reframe to continue?
Hmm. What challenges? I mean, as a producer,
Mm,
I'm dealing with people that are editing, filming, that typically are alone and solo and choose that kind of solitary work. Then I'm dealing with management teams and PR teams and talent. And then also uh, figuring out how all of that comes together in a way. How do we communicate to each other? How do we
mhm.
figure? So the challenges that I come up against are really more communication based. What
Yeah,
is the best way through this? Because honestly, the shows that do really well are the ones that can get through the hard times. And if you
yeah,
have a really good base, a
yeah,
setup that is impenetrable, it means you can weather the storm. And that's probably the biggest challenge is and again, I'm really lucky because I get to choose the talent that I work with or bring in to Good Mess Media. And I have a rule: no more assholes. I don't mean that to be
I love
disrespectful.
that.
That
I,
that's it. Is honestly, I just work with fantastic people who are good humans first,
yeah,
and everything else comes after.
yeah, I love that. I'm definitely at that point, you know? That's like a medal we give ourselves at one point, just because everything else is not worth it.
Well, I'm in my 40s now. There's I can't pander. I don't want to. If we work together, it's because you want to be there and I want to be there, and
Yeah,
together we want to make something,
yeah,
incredible that people are going to love. And if business is people, if you
yeah.
do not get along or you can't communicate in a way that makes sense, then it's not going to end well. It never
Oh,
does.
I completely agree. Trace, what are your plans and goals? Talk to us about the future of good mass media and your life.
Absolutely. Well, I've just expanded into a creative studio space, and I'm really excited about that. We only just got the keys 3 days ago, so it's fresh for me, but I would love to continue to grow Good Mess Media in a very intentional, thoughtful way
Hmm.
that stays true to who we are.
Yeah,
And if and when we grow, I really want to keep that mission at the forefront always. And then I have always there's it's we're going to call it the Good Mess Fest. The Good Mess Fest is something that is in the pipeline, and it's something I'm really excited about, where I get to highlight the talent who is under the umbrella of Good Mess Media, but also invite other thought leaders to the stage and do it over a 3 or 5 day period. That's something that I have been thinking about since I was maybe 12 years old, and pulling together extraordinary humans together to tell stories, just ah it's a chef's kiss. So it's something that I really like to develop and see come to fruition in the future, in the next year or so, maybe 18 months.
that sounds so exciting, Tracy. I want to be there. And I'm also
Yes.
sitting with this, and I've talked to Dre and Em about this, There is really something in that system of life events or of conferences where we have to change the the sort of current setup of like a person or two at the front talking at people in the audience who often leave disconnected and lonelier than before. They know a few more things maybe, but I just think that the information that's being spread is not landing in a way because it's not connective enough, it's not immersive enough, it's not interactive enough. So I'm really sitting with this and I'm talking to all the young people and the people that in the schools and the universities I go into to talk to young people is playing with their ideas and asking them for their ideas because I really think this is a formula that needs to change. And I'm
Mm,
really excited for the future because I think these new generations, they want to feel more. They want to be connected more. They need to be connected more. And they learn better when they have a real sense of belonging. And right now, we are not fostering that at none of the events I ever go to.
mm.
And so that's really something worth thinking about. And so I'm excited for what you're cooking up.
How about you? I'm curious, and I have to ask, what are you excited about for the future?
I'm excited because while we get fed this very divisive story, I interview several people most days, and I'm so hopeful because there are so many incredible humans in the world that do so many interesting, inspiring, motivating things. And yeah, I'm excited about that. I'm excited about people, and I think we are so much more connected than we are divided. And I want to hold on to that notion and I want to find all these people and interview them and stick them all on this one platform so it's easily accessible because no one's ever set up a library of role models before. And why in the world didn't they? You
Mm,
know, and while maybe I'm not the best person in the world to do it because there might be people better suited to doing it, it's, you know, it's me. And so and God knows, you know, I'm hoping that there'll be other people interviewing their role models and sticking it onto the platform. It's something that I've imagined ever since I started it, and it hasn't really taken off yet, that side. And it has to, because then one grows much faster and one, you know, and everyone should be able to interview their role models and get the information onto a 30-minute clip and, you know, stick
mm,
it on here for people to access really easily. And so I'm excited about the young people, all the young people I sit with. I absolutely love, and that's in many parts of the world. You know, whether that's in Africa or in America or in Europe or in Asia, there is so many great ideas, so much passion for the greater good
mm.
in the room. And I think this is something we forget about. We just have to remember, be reminded and remember and walk into that direction with as many people as we can.
I love that. I love that because it comes from a guttural place of wanting to see some change. And you're right, the young people today, I mean, listening to podcasts, they're all ages, but young people, they're really seeking information. And we live in an information overload world, as we
Yeah.
talked about, but they're showing up to more live events because like the festivals are coming back and
Mm.
on stage being next to someone buying tickets standing in a line. Do you remember we used to stand, I think I
Yes.
stood
Oh
in
my God.
line for
I
like
have friends from queuing friends.
yes,
Yeah.
exactly. I remember my brother and I stood in line probably an entire day for U2 tickets back in the 90s.
Yeah.
And it there was something really fun about that. I mean, you were bored out of your mind, but it was so much fun and you'd end
Yeah.
up singing with strangers and some people were reading poetry. Like it's just hilarious what happens when you're in line. And so I think going back to your earlier question of like what is it that people are seeking? I really think it's that old school way of let's gather together, let's hang out, let's sing a song, let's
Mm.
stand together at a light, whatever it may be. It's just being together. And I think that's something that I'm looking forward to, and why I really want to create this festival, not only for my talent, but also to invite thought leaders. And who knows, Stephanie, maybe you should come and be on stage and be a thought leader at the Good
Well,
Mess
I'd
Fest.
love to
I'd
be
love.
in the audience, so let's aim for that.
I think you are, and I know you said you're uncomfortable being in front of the camera, but I think you're a natural. And I do think it's why people love watching this show, is because you come at your conversations and you're, like I've said maybe 5 times, great question. And the reason is because you're thoughtful about the way you're framing things and how you're, who you're bringing on to. I've seen some of the episodes that you've done, and the people are extraordinary. And that's what I just love what you're doing.
Oh, Tracy, thank you so much. Tracy, if we had to sum it up, so the takeaways for our listeners, if you had to sum it up in a few sentences, what would that be?
Have a go. If it's in you to do it, have a go. Worst case scenario, it doesn't work, and that's okay.
Yeah, I love
It's
it.
okay. It's okay if it doesn't work. And you can pivot and you can try again and you can find something that the experience helps you in other parts of your life. Have a go.
Tracy, I'm so grateful for you to lead on We Can. I love the deeply human values that you lead with, and you make them into businesses, right? So there is really a beautiful way where, and you're showing this with the people you produce with or produce for, that is a possibility. You can do both. And I think we forget about that. And we're a little bit in a place where we forget about that as humans in general. And I love your values. And I am so grateful for Good Mess Media being in this world. And I want everyone to look up Good Mess Media. Tracey Thomas, thank you so much.
Thank you, Stephanie. Thank you so much. It was a pleasure.